Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Here we are. Tomorrow is election day, of course. Our live coverage starts right here at 6 o'clock. I'll be taking the first 2 hours. The rest of the team will take over the rest after that when the polls start closing. And holy cow, let's get this over with. So here's my reminder of the week, just as it was last week. First, God is in control. Second, I saw Jocko. He wrote yesterday, he said, when things get crazy, make sure you don't, no matter what happens. Coming up in the next segment, I want to tell you why I think Trump's going to win. I have three reasons. There's a ton of reasons, but three main reasons, and they're of pretty specific detail. This segment, I want to talk about big picture, why I think Trump is going to win. Big thematic reasons why Trump's going to win. First, well, let me give you the thesis right now. So my conclusion is peace always beats war. Optimism beats pessimism. Strength always beats weakness. And hope beats despair. So we got peace, optimism, strength, and hope. That always beats the opposite. And for the last couple of weeks, at least, that's been President Trump's message versus Biden's. Okay? So let's prove this here. Check out this from the New York Times, their opinion section the other day. They've completely lost their minds. What have we lost? And they've had each of their 15 opinion writers wrote an article about how heinous and horrible these last 4 years have been. Here's all the things that we've lost. Let me quote one of these. What's terrible about Trump is also terrible about the United States. Everything we've seen in the last 4 years, the nativism, the racism, the corruption, the wanton exploitation of the weak, and unconcealed contempt for the vulnerable, is as much a part of the American story as our highest ideals and aspirations. And to the extent that Americans feel a sense of loss about the Trump era, they should be grateful because it means they've given up their illusions about what this country really is and what it is and has been capable of. Jeez, man. And not only is this entire article like that, they're all like that. Just doom and gloom, how awful and terrible America is. Democrats are this party. This is who the Democrats are. This is oddly, purposefully, what they've projected these last few months of the campaign. It's insane. Meanwhile, Trump comes out, has a party every single day, like 5 of them, every single day in 5 different states, and says America's the greatest country in the world. America's awesome. We love America. The professor from Columbia, I don't know if we ended up talking about it on the TV show or not, but the professor from Columbia said the American flag is a symbol of genocide and oppression, and Trump rallies are just covered in American flags everywhere. That candidate's going to win every time. Hope always beats despair. And the over-the-top hysteria these last 4 years is going to lead Trump to victory again. Frank Bruni is one of the New York Times editorialists, opinion writers, and he wrote one of those pieces. And he wrote, "How will I ever look at America the same way again?" These last 4 years, how will I ever look at America again? Let me quote Beckett Adams. He says, Frank Bruni's 56. Imagine being a grown adult with knowledge of and experience living through the Kennedy and civil rights assassinations, Vietnam, Richard Nixon, the 68 Democratic Convention, Waco, Fed-assisted financial crisis, drone wars, NSA, and just now you're like, I've lost my political innocence. I know we use the word privilege a lot, but it really is the height of privilege to know that what we know about U.S. history and assert that the past 4 years have been the darkest and most damaging, like children who have been told no for the first time. And that's the thing about Trump's 2016 victory. It wasn't just a political win. It was a repudiation of an entire worldview. These people have been trying ever since to cope however they can. These ahistorical lamentations are just the latest in a running 4-year therapy session. Truly, these are the darkest days, I say, between spoonfuls of applesauce, just totally, completely, blissfully unaware of the American Civil War. That's so good. That hysteria has done the left no favors these last 4 years. I'm not, we could talk about, I'm not totally sure about Trump's motivation. This is kind of going even like one step bigger. I'm not totally sure Trump's motivation in his life. My belief is he's always been trying to live up to his dad's legacy. His dad was a successful real estate business guy in Queens, and Trump wanted to be bigger and better, and he wanted to take over Manhattan, right? And I don't know much, but I'm really curious about their relationship and the relationship between his dad, between Donald and his dad, that drove Donald to be so obsessed with success and winning all the time, right? There's something going on there. But I am certain about Joe Biden's motivation in his life. Biden's motivation is to prove that he's not stupid. His whole childhood, Joe was told that he was stupid because he had a stutter. Teachers and kids would make fun of him his entire childhood and say, "You're stupid." I saw a video, some dad brought his son, maybe like 12 years old, to a Biden event. This had to be pre-COVID. I'm certain it was pre-COVID. And the dad said, "Hey, Mr. Vice President, my son has a stutter and he wanted to come see you." And Joe immediately gets close to him and says, "Son, you are not stupid." Because Joe knows what it's like for his entire childhood to be called stupid. So Joe's whole life, he's wanted power, but mostly prestige, to prove all those people wrong. And now, nearing the end of his life and the end of his legacy, it has come across as angry. And maybe part of that's because he knows he's going to lose to this guy, to Trump. Here's what I mean. These are two clips from his speech in Pennsylvania, like last Thursday or something.
Maybe it's the Scranton. I got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I read that if I got elected president, I'd only be the second guy in this century, in the last century, that, in fact, didn't go to an Ivy League school. Well, what the hell does that say about my state school I went to? Like it didn't mean I don't belong? My guess is a lot of you have felt the same way in your lives. I say it's about time a state school guy gets to go to the Oval Office. I've dealt with guys like Trump my whole life, so have you. Guys who look down on you because they have a lot of money. Guys who think they're better than you. Guys who inherit everything in life and then squander it. Guys who stiff electricians and plumbers and contractors working on their hotels and casinos and golf courses. Guys who avoid paying their own taxes they owe because they figure, as he said last time out, it's because he's smart. He's able to play the system, pay $750 in taxes being a billionaire. Well, I'm sick and tired of smart guys.
That was different, wasn't it? That was like very personal. And as I said, it came across very angry. You don't hear anger from Trump. Also, it's not even close to true what he said there, by the way, the Ivy League school part. Reagan went to Eureka, Hoover went to Stanford, Truman went to Spalding, Eisenhower went to West Point, Johnson went to Texas State, Carter went to the Naval Academy, right? So the Ivy League point's not even true. Of the last 15 presidents, 7 did not go to an Ivy League school. So like half, he not. But what I heard there from Joe reminded me of Nixon. And one day, not today, obviously, the day before the election, but one day we'll share part of Nixon's story. Nixon went to Whittier. He was so insecure about his lack of Ivy League degree. He also had a lot of bitterness towards his parents, I think his mom in particular. So Nixon had 2 of his brothers died when he was very young. And I forget the whole story, but I think the deal is he wasn't, because his brothers died from sickness, his mom like coddled him and protected him so much, wouldn't let him do things. And they didn't have a lot of money, so he wasn't able to go to an Ivy League school. And he was deeply insecure about that. And it drove him to paranoia. Nixon was a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant. But his demons led him to his own destruction in the end, because his insecurity turned to paranoia. And I think Biden's similar in a lot of those ways, because that insecurity can be channeled into something that looks inspiring, and it can dissolve into anger and bitterness. And I think that's what that sounded like, and that's not a winning recipe. One more Biden clip.
When he was told a while ago it passed 1,000 people a day, he looked at the camera. Remember what he said? He said, "It is what it is." Well, it is what it is because he is who he is. That's why it is what it is. Yesterday was the worst day we've had. Yet, in our debate on Thursday night, Trump was still saying, we're rounding the corner. It's going away. We're learning to live with it. As I told him, we're not learning to live it, we're learning to die with it. Because he's doing nothing.
Jeez, that just doesn't sound like a guy who's winning a campaign. The next line right after that, Biden says there's a dark winter ahead. It's like, wow, you're doubling down on that line from the debate. Trump's rallies don't sound like that at all. The big meme from the Trump rally is the president dancing. Right? He does this like dance. there's like TikTok dance tutorial how to do the Trump dance. They're super fun. If you've been watching these things, they're hilarious. Everyone's laughing, having a great time. Biden's talking about how there's a dark winter ahead. Trump had a rally in Michigan this weekend. I watched a little bit of it. And he walked out and he just couldn't stop talking about how freezing cold it is in Michigan. And everyone was loving it. And he's like, I got this, the wind's blowing in my face. I can barely breathe. Everyone's laughing, cracking up. So while Trump's talking about how it's cold outside and laughing, Biden's talking about how a dark winter is ahead. So my point is the peace president, which Trump certainly is, maybe more so than any candidate, any president in decades, the peace president always wins over the war president. The optimist always wins over the pessimist. Strength always beats weakness. And hope always beats despair. Peace, optimism, strength, and hope always win. That's big picture why I think Trump's going to win tomorrow. I want to prove more with some details on the ground next. Now, if you've seen DC and New York City and LA, you've seen these cities are like from last week, they've been boarded up. All the downtown buildings are boarded up. And of course, they're awaiting riots, probably no matter what happens. Certainly if Trump wins. In these super progressive cities, everyone's worried about riots from the left, of course. It's going to be a disaster if Trump wins, which I think he will. It's going to be a disaster for a while, which is one of the reasons I bought gold. Patriot Gold Group, I was talking to them the other day, I was talking to the executives and some of the people who pick up the phones. They've never seen anything like this these last few weeks. People buying gold and silver like never before. And for me, there's a lot of reasons, but it's just something you do as an adult. It's just being prepared, it's being prudent, it's being wise. It's like having food for an emergency or a fire extinguisher or flashlights, right? It's just, and not only for the chaos to come, which we know is coming, everyone knows it's coming. All the buildings are boarded up. But also because we've been printing money forever, but these COVID lockdowns, in particular these last 8 months, we've never seen anything like it. The value of the dollar is crashing. Not going to crash, it's crashing. And you can't print more gold. That's why I got gold. Call Patriot Gold Group, they're gonna send you some. So you can just lock in the price right now, right? You call them up today, call them up right now. And it's boom, today's the price, right? It takes a couple days to get there, but chaos ensues, price goes up, doesn't matter. You locked in today. And they'll mail it to you. It's that simple. It takes a few minutes. It's crazy. It's America's highest rated precious investment firm by Consumer Affairs. 1-800-798-4260. The election's tomorrow. Get your gold in the mail today. Also, when you want to sell it back, just sell it back to Patriot Gold Group. No fees. Just sell it right back. 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Call them right now. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I've always made fun of sports talk radio because they talk about the big game that's coming up this weekend. And I'm always like, well, just wait. Like, wait a day and you'll know. Why are you guys pontificating about this? Just wait a minute. And here we are, these last few weeks, talking about what's going to happen. We're less than 48 hours out, talking about who's going to win. Now, it's like, Slater, just wait. But I feel like there's a ton of anxiety right now. And I just want to give some hope and hopefully relieve some anxiety for the next day. So you kind of live your life. The next Tuesday's going to be crazy. Tuesday's going to be like, come on, 7 o'clock, hurry up. So I want to give on the ground reasons why I think Trump's going to win. Just shared big picture why I think Trump's going to win, right? Peace, optimism, hope. But now I want to share some on the ground examples. I got 3 of them. First, Friday, Joe Biden made one of his very few trips outside Delaware. And he didn't go to Texas, which the Democrats keep fantasizing about every election. Oh, Texas is going to turn blue. He went to Minnesota. Minnesota, one of the few stops he takes outside of Delaware, right across the 10-minute drive to Philadelphia, and he goes to Minnesota? Minnesota's been a blue state since, they haven't elected a Republican since 1972 for president. 1972. And Biden is trying to shore up Minnesota, and we're supposed to believe he's way in the lead everywhere else? I don't think so. The postmortem on Minnesota is going to be Minneapolis, George Floyd. No one wants to say it, but that's why. It was the riots after George Floyd, and then the ineptness of their mayor. Remember their mayor? He's so far over his head, and the governor there as well. Minnesota's always been such a weird place politically. Like, I don't understand Minnesota. They elected Al Franken and Tim Pawlenty. We're like those are like opposite people. And then Jesse Ventura was their governor. The current governor is a member of the Democrat Farmer Labor Party. Like, what is that? What's the Democrat? It sounds like something from some 18th century British party. Like, what's the Democrat Farmer Labor Party? So Minnesota's kind of a weird thing going on politically. But Hillary was up by between 8 and 10 points in Minnesota, and she only won by 1.5. So she was up by 8, won by 1.5. Biden's up by 4.3. And that's the smallest lead that he's had this entire time. So first reason why I think Trump's going to win is Biden is panicking and went to Minnesota on Friday. Trump only lost, there was 1.7 million votes in 2016 in Minnesota, 1.7 million. He lost by 44,000. Second, you're starting to see Democrats panic. All right, S.C. Cupp, who I don't understand, she made this video the other day. She said, I have an uneasy feeling about what may happen again. Debbie Dingell, longtime Michigan Democrat, her and her husband, she represents this area outside of Detroit, Congress. And she said Trump's going to win Michigan in 2016. And she's saying the same thing now. Right? She's ringing the alarm at least. And I want to play this clip. And I love this clip because in the beginning, she's on CNN and she says very politically, right? Very measured. She says, well, Allison, the other day I was talking to some auto workers and they were very clear to me that they were voting for Trump. And I'm a little concerned about this for blah, 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 blah. 3 minutes into the interview, she finally lets it down and gets real. Here's what she says.
I think Joe Biden and the ad campaigns are, you reach voters in many different ways. We have to make sure that we're talking. Look, you want to know what the auto worker said to me last night? He said, I'm tired of your Democratic friends. They look down on me. I said, that's not true about Joe Biden. He categorically does not. A little of what I said 4 years ago, that President Obama promised to save our jobs. He did. But, a lot of workers lost their jobs in 2008 or didn't get a pay raise for a long time. We have to remember that working men and women are really worried.
I love it. So again, in the beginning, she's like, well, I was talking to some auto workers the other day, and the auto worker told me. And then eventually she's like, okay, look, you want to know what he said? He said, you guys are crazy. He said, you Democrats are crazy psychos, okay? And that's why I'm voting for Trump, right? Although she couldn't get it out at first. Okay, you want to know? Her ultimate point at the end was the Democratic Party is paying too much attention to the Flint voter, meaning the black voter, and not the white working class voter in Michigan and Wisconsin. Also, Michael Moore. Michael Moore was the first person on the left to say that Trump is going to win in 2016. He was the first person in 2016 that said Trump's going to win. And here he is saying the same things. He's saying, Democrats, you should not believe these polls. He says the Trump voter is always being undercounted because the Trump voter is very suspicious that when they're asked on the phone who they're going to vote for, that it's the deep state, and they shouldn't be honest with them. We'll talk about that in a second, but here's Michael Moore.
So it is not an accurate count. I think the safe thing to do, this is not scientific, I'm just saying from my experience of being a Michigander, whatever they're saying the Biden lead is, cut it in half right now in your head. Cut it in half, and now you're within the 4-point margin of error. That's how close this is.
And they should be worried, right? Look at these. I mean, we talked on Thursday's show, we talked about momentum. These rallies have been insane for Trump. This is absolutely insane. Yesterday he went to 5 states. 5 states. This is Butler, Pennsylvania, just the other day. This got the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, wrote this long tweet about how, what the heck is going on? Everyone should be freaking out. But it's not just rallies. It's these non-affiliated events across the country. Boat parades, car parades. I've never seen enthusiasm like this. You think Mitt Romney had a boat parade? And then you compare it to Biden. It's a total joke. Bon Jovi went to a Biden rally. There were 232 cars to Bon Jovi. Trump went to 5 states yesterday. Biden went to Philadelphia. This was a taunt. Biden sent this picture out as a taunt. It said something like, you can't fit this many people in my basement. You're like, well, how many cars are there? I'm really bad at guessing numbers. There's like 100 cars? And that's Biden's taunt? Amazing. So the Democrats have reasons to be worried. And then my third thing is endorsements. Now, I don't ever put any emphasis on endorsements, but a flood of endorsements could have a cultural effect. Brett Favre endorsing Trump. Obviously, Brett Favre is like the hero of Wisconsin, right? Is there any more influential person in Wisconsin than Brett Favre? We saw last week it was Jack Nicklaus, the golfer, and then Lil Pump and Lil Wayne added on to 50 Cent, Ice Cube, Kanye, right? So here, Lil Wayne sent this, Dwayne Carter, sent this out to 34 million followers talking about how Trump is investing in the black community or whatever. And you're just like, what? This is an avalanche of very diverse support. And I think that has an effect because I think it normalizes a vote for Trump, which is maybe Trump's biggest issue, right? I think Trump's biggest issue is a lot of voters who are like, oh, I just can't. He's so mean. I'm not supposed to like him. I just can't do it. And then there's all these very diverse people saying they're doing it. And I think it's just enough of a life raft that people can just grab onto it and be like, oh, okay, if they can, then I can too, and not feel bad about it. And I think that's the most important point to note, and you're gonna hear all about it. And the postmortem of all this, it's all you're gonna hear about, is the shy Trump voter. There were 2 pollsters who got this right in 2016. Politico wrote this long article about it and an interview with these 2 pollsters about the shy Trump voter. So this is a person who's not gonna tell the truth to a stranger on the phone. So they came up with a different question. So instead of asking, who are you voting for? The question is, who do you think most of your friends and neighbors will vote for? What that question does is it gives people enough plausible deniability. It gives them enough distance where, so if they ask the first question, they call you up, you're a total stranger, and you don't like confrontation, and you don't know how the other person's voting on the other side of the line. You don't know if you're being recorded. And they ask who you're gonna vote for. You'll be like, Biden. Yeah, Biden. Yeah, voting Biden. Or maybe you're like, oh, I'm not sure, just don't know. You know you're voting for Trump. Like, I just don't know. But if they ask you, well, who do you think most of your friends and neighbors will vote for? You're more likely to say, oh, yeah, they're big Trump supporters. Big Trump supporters. But it's really you who's the big Trump supporter. But that you can give it a little distance and be like, oh, yeah, they're the Trump supporters. I'm still not sure. Or I'm a Biden supporter. Yeah, that's it. I'm a Biden supporter. But yeah, all those people, my friends and neighbors, they're big Trump supporters. And they believe that in 2016, that gave a more accurate analysis. They were the only 2 pollsters who got it right. Here's an interview. We live in a country where people will lie to their accountants, they'll lie to their doctor, they'll lie to their priest. And we're supposed to believe that they shed all of that when they get on the telephone with a stranger? Relying on live callers for polls is especially bad in the modern era where social desirability bias is in full play. People avoid awkward conversations. So when a person you don't know calls and asks how you feel about Donald Trump, and you don't know how they feel, you tend to give them an answer that you think will make them look at you in the best light. Quick time out. I had someone do this to me last night. They said, Slater, have you watched the Cobra Kai on Netflix, the Cobra Kai Karate Kid show? And I was like, he goes, have we seen it? He's like, I saw a little bit of it the other day, and and it's, have you seen it? I said, no, I haven't seen it, but I've heard some good things. And my wife chimed in, she said, no, I want to see it. I heard good things. And he goes, oh, okay, good. I've watched 10 episodes. But he was like afraid to come out with, oh, I watched 10 episodes of this, you have to watch it right away. He was a low propensity Cobra Kai fan, right? He was like a shy Cobra Kai supporter. So he wanted to first kind of feel it out. Like, oh yeah, I've watched a little bit. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you want? And then once we kind of revealed that my wife or at least wants to watch it, he's like, okay, good. I've watched 10 episodes. It's great. Same thing. Just happened last night. Let's see. We've seen it year after year, and I think it's much more at play this year. And also, people are busier than ever, and long questionnaires reduce the ability of average people to participate. Who has time to answer 22 questions on a Tuesday night when you're trying to fix dinner or put your kids to bed? Nobody. And you end up with people on the ideological extremes, either very conservative, very liberal, or worse, people who are bored. If a pollster called me up at 6:30, like, sorry, man, I gotta go. I've got time for this. Now, back to the shy Trump voter, because that's one aspect, is like, who answers these live polls anyway? But to the shy Trump voter, the person who's not quite sure, wants to feel it out or whatever, the culture, our country is very different. There's different unique cultures all around. The part of the country that's more likely to be deferential to that is the Midwest. Right? They're just a more deferential people, more like, oh, excuse me, sorry. And less likely to get in a confrontation, more likely to avoid an awkward conversation. So the shy Trump voter is true everywhere, but it's going to be especially true with polls in the Midwest. And we'll see. This is a poll from a Pennsylvania House congressional district, Scranton, right? Scranton's 2 hours from Philly with no traffic, 2 hours from Philly, 2.5 from New York City, Biden's hometown or whatever. So the first question was, who are you voting for? And it was, I had it here. I think it was Biden. There it is. Trump 46, Biden 48. All right, so who are you voting for? Biden's in the lead, up by 2. In Scranton, up by 2, 48-46. But then they asked the question, okay, well, regardless of who you're voting for, President, who do you think more of your neighbors are voting for? And it was Trump 51, Biden 34. That's a huge difference. Trump goes up 5, Biden drops 14. So it could be, I guess the other explanation is people just wrongly, incorrectly think their neighbors are voting for Trump. Like Trump supporters are louder, I guess, but I don't think Trump supporters are very loud. Most of them, I don't think they are, because back in 2016, the worst that can happen is if you say you're voting for Trump is you get called a deplorable or laughed at. Today, the worst thing that happens if you vote for Trump, or like not even the worst, but like a thing that happens is you get called a racist, fascist, bigot, Nazi. So I think the things that made a shy Trump voter in 2016 are 1,000 times more in effect today. And still you have that many people saying, oh yeah, my neighbors are definitely gonna vote for Trump. I think that's people actually saying they're the ones who are gonna vote for Trump. The good news is we'll know soon, just a couple days. Again, we got live election coverage tomorrow. I'll kick it off at 6 Eastern. And then we got the whole rest of the team all night long right here on The First. True story, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Well, let's talk a little more about some of the potential troubles that are going to be coming up, to say the least, if we don't know, tomorrow. Article here from NBC News. Trump says he's sending his lawyers as soon as the election ends to review swing states' votes. What are they going to be looking for? One of our favorite guests, Hans von Spakovsky, is here. He's a senior legal fellow at the Mies Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. von Spakovsky, how are you, sir?
I'm doing just great, thanks.
What are they going to be looking for in these swing states, these lawyers?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that Vice President Biden's lawyers have already been in all of these states, and all year they've been filing lawsuits trying to change the rules, mostly the rules governing absentee ballots. So I suspect that what President Trump's lawyers will be doing will be making sure that local county election officials abided by whatever the final set of rules were as set by either the legislature or if there was a court decision, for example, extending the deadline for the receipt of absentee ballots. His lawyers will be there making sure they followed the rules and didn't suddenly waive those rules and do something else.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Well, for example, in South Carolina, a lawsuit was filed by liberal groups claiming that because of COVID-19, the state should not be able to enforce its witness signature requirement. You know, if you vote with an absentee ballot after you sign it, you have to have a witness also sign it. A lower court issued a decision saying South Carolina couldn't enforce its witness signature requirement. That went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court overruled that. But I suspect the Trump lawyers will want to make sure that county election officials actually do enforce the witness signature requirement and don't just suddenly decide to waive it and count absentee ballots that are not complying with that state law requirement.
Wow, that's so interesting. So just on that one in specific, so the argument again was because of COVID and I guess you're not allowed to be near anyone, we should waive the signature. And the lower courts agreed with that. They thought that was a okay argument?
They did, but like I said, the higher courts overruled them in particular because the state of South Carolina actually brought in the head of the infectious disease division at the medical school of South Carolina, who testified that with face masks and social distancing, it was very easy to witness somebody sign an absentee ballot, and there was almost no chance of catching an infection.
Wow, so I voted the other day, and I was the only one in line. I went early Saturday at 7 a.m., but I could just see how much chaos there was going to be. No one really knew. I had to surrender my mail-in ballot, and I handed it to the person, and they're like, well, what do you want me to do with this? Right? It's going to be chaos. How can they ever keep it proper? It's just going to be so much madness. What can these lawyers really even do?
Well, like I said, I think they're going to be involved in potential litigation in states where the outcome is very close. So in other words, for example, look, a lot of absentee ballots, as you probably know, might get rejected. You know, voters forget to sign them. They don't get them to election officials in time, et cetera. And I suspect that if the number of rejected absentee ballots is larger than the margin of victory, what you're going to see are litigation fights arguing over whether those ballots should be counted anyway, even though voters made mistakes or didn't comply with state law.
Wow. Oh, goodness me. What about the timing? Because every state's different with this too, right? It's got to be postmarked by election day. It's got to be received by election day. What's the spectrum of those rules?
Well, the spectrum is everything from states that say that the absentee ballot has to be in the hands of election officials by the end of election day to states that have extended that deadline for up to a week and a half after election day, as long as the envelope for the absentee ballot is postmarked by election day. Except that then you have things like Pennsylvania, where the state Supreme Court issued what I consider an unbelievable decision. They told election officials that even if the absentee ballot they receive after the election doesn't have a postmark on it, so they don't actually know if it was voted by the end of election day, they have to count it anyway.
What's that?
I just don't understand how the court could make such a decision. It invites all kinds of problems. But the state Supreme Court That was their final rule, and the U.S. Supreme Court refused to take the case on an emergency appeal from the state legislature.
Whoa. Well, that, Mr. Von Spakovsky, seems to be a problem, especially in Pennsylvania. No, I feel like we're going to be revisiting this one, no?
Yeah, but look, it's the day before the election, right? It's a Monday. There's a court hearing today in Texas, in federal court, because one of the counties there, Harris County, allowed people to do drive-through voting, curbside voting. 127,000 people did that, even though Texas law doesn't allow curbside voting. So some folks have gone to court saying those ballots should not be counted because Texas law doesn't allow curbside voting. So the day before the election, we may get a court decision about that.
Whoa. Okay. So timing is a tricky thing here, because one thing I've learned in my very limited knowledge of all this is these Supreme Court cases take a long time, right? I mean, like years, and they even hear it and it takes a long time. So how do these things speed up and get so fast?
Well, what's been happening over the past month is we have seen emergency appeals filed with the Supreme Court. So, for example, the Pennsylvania case that I'm talking about, as soon as the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court issued its decision, members of the legislature filed an emergency appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court made a decision within days of that. And that's been happening with court decisions affecting elections from all over the country. The Supreme Court realizes they have to look at these cases and make a decision immediately because of the proximity of the election.
Yeah, so the Supreme Court, I'm sure, is on standby right now, right?
They certainly are, yes.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, can you think of any law right now or any state? I just have this feeling, I had this a couple days ago, that there's going to be some election quirky law from 1912 in some, like Minnesota, that had to do with like horses, horseback carriage to the polls or something, that's going to like screw everything up. Is there anything like that that's on the back of your mind?
No, like I said, I think the biggest fights are going to be over the fact that some states suddenly extended the deadline for the receipt of absentee ballots beyond what state law has said for years is the deadline. And I think that's really where the fights are going to be potentially after the election.
Okay. Hans von Spakovsky, you're going to be busy yourself, I'm sure, these next few days. Hopefully we can talk again, because I have a good feeling this will happen, right? I'm sure something's going to be disputed, right? Are you pretty confident about that?
It is, if it's a close election. If it's a landslide for one side or the other, then we're not going to get these fights. But if it's a close election, yeah, you're going to see fights.
Don't you think it'd still be, if it was a landslide, don't you think you'd have the other side screaming even more? Like, how could it be a landslide? There must be fraud or something.
No, usually these kind of disputes only happen when it's a really, really close election. Probably the best example of that, as you know, was the 2000 election, where Florida came down to literally 500 votes, deciding who would be president of the United States.
Oh, amazing. Oh, please don't be that again. Hans von Spakovsky from Heritage Foundation. Thank you, Hans. Appreciate your insight.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Yeah, some of this stuff is going to come back and bite us. I am certain of that. All right, we're going to talk with Professor Vincent Racaniello about COVID and is it safe to go to the polls and how you should stay safe. Do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Hey, it's our Super Bowl tomorrow, but we still are grateful and must take some time to talk with our professor, Professor Vincent Racaniello, who's a virologist professor at Columbia University, and you have to listen to his podcast at microbe.tv. It's called This Week in Virology. Professor, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And you're right, I am your professor.
That's as much of a professor as I've ever had, that's for sure. Sir, people are concerned perhaps about going to the polls. I went on Saturday. California polls are open Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And I was first in line, 7 o'clock, empty polls, first day open. And it was like I was in the biohazard scene from E.T., right? Like everyone was like total like gown. I was like in a hospital ward. It was a lot. But anyway, I don't know. But what are some things people should keep in mind when going to the polls? Should they be concerned, et cetera?
Well, I think you can do things like that as long as you take precautions. First of all, you should wear a face mask. And I heard a story that someone went to a poll wearing a Trump face mask and they made him take it off. But I would say let him wear it because that's going to protect you. It doesn't matter what's on the face mask. So face mask, I'm sure they're keeping people 6 feet away. And that's really important, you know, and I've been in a bunch of lines like for medical procedures and they keep you 6 feet away. And then remember, all the people who are working there, they're there all day. So they're getting constant exposure. That's why they're all gowned up, and don't be afraid of them because they're doing that to protect themselves. And
you're right. They have a very different, you're right. They have, sorry, if I may, they have a different variable than I do. You're right. I'm in and out. They're
that's
there
right. So
8 hours.
That's a good thing. If you're now, of course, in many states there are lines and that's a problem, but just stay away from people. And wear that mask properly. Don't put it down below your nose. That's really going to help you a lot. And then remember also, when you go into the booth and you punch buttons and stuff, your hands, everybody else has been touching those buttons too. So don't touch your face until you can wash your hands. That's really important because that's another way we can spread this virus. So I think you can do it very safely, okay? And don't be afraid.
Okay, so mask, bring hand sanitizer.
Mask,
boom, done.
distance.
And there was...
In fact, bring hand sanitizer with you, yeah.
Yeah, there was some there, now that I think about it. There was some there as you're walking out. They had some. What about touching some things, right? There were a lot of extra precautions in California. Long story, but there were a couple different things you had to touch and pens you had to grab and styluses and stuff like that. What do we know about the transmission of touching right now? Again, you said don't touch your eyes, but...
So we don't think that touch transmission is a major part of the way the virus is spread. We think mainly it's respiratory droplets, but there is a possibility. We know that, for example, you touch your nose and you pick up mucus with virus in it if you happen to be infected. Then you go touch the buttons in the voting booth. You're going to leave some virus there, and it will last for a few hours, and someone else could come and pick it up. It's hard to document those kinds of infections, but we know they happen with other respiratory viruses. And it's quite clear that they happen with this one. So just keep your hands away from your face and eyes until you can wash them. That's what we have to do.
So it sounds like the message from our professor is don't let COVID keep you away from a polling booth.
Not at all. Not at all. Hey, I went to buy a car last week and I had to go and touch things. And I just kept my hands in my pockets until I could wash them, and I'm okay.
Oh, we should play a game. What kind of car did the professor buy?
What do you think?
The professor got, it could have been a classic car. Professor could have gotten like a nice, or he could have got a Cadillac. Think the professor got a Cadillac? Or the professor get a Prius, a very sensible Prius?
No, I don't want a Prius. I'm not a sensible guy, frankly, even though.
That's what it's either a Prius or he's like driving around in a Hummer. It's one of the other extremes here. What do we get? What's the professor get?
I got a Mini Cooper.
Oh, I'm in the spirit with that. Why'd you get the Mini Cooper?
Well, I had a car for 13 years before that. It was a BMW, really nice 2007, beautifully engineered car, but it was breaking, so I needed to get a new one. And my daughter has a Mini, and I drove it, and I really liked it. So I bought I used one. It was 6-speed manual transmission. It handles really well. I like it.
Manual. They still sell manual cars at all. See, I was pretty close, Professor. It's very sensible.
I have never had anything but a manual transmission car my whole life.
Wow, I'm literally surprised that you could still do that. I thought that was totally a done deal. I didn't know you could buy any manual. Even like in sports cars, I didn't think you could manual. Professor, so that's all wonderful news, and I think that's great. Everyone go to the polls. Don't let that stop you. Your doctor that you have on your podcast, who's wonderful, Daniel Griffin, it says here he did this is the result of 30 physicians and scientists around the world working to create a consensus framework for COVID-19 stages. So this sounds like the most authoritative. You get it from day one. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? So I think we can throw it up on the screen here, but what have you learned from this funny looking graph?
So this is a course of an infection. It can be either a mild infection or one of the serious ones that goes on, right? So first, you get exposed to the virus, it starts to reproduce in you. And then it shoots up maybe in 5 days or so. It reaches a peak. So you're making a lot of virus in your upper respiratory tract. And that's about when the symptoms begin, if you're going to have symptoms. And then the viral peak goes down very quickly within the next week. And most people that they're finished, right? They're over. But some people go on to have serious disease, and that's called the inflammatory phase, where your immune system is killing you, basically. And the viral loads are very low during that period. But we have all kinds of issues then, like clotting issues, hyperinflammatory issues. It's all your immune response doing that. And the key here, and this is the most important point you can get from this, is it's not virus-driven anymore. It's driven by your abnormal immune response. So there's no point in giving these individuals antivirals like, drug remdesivir or monoclonal antibodies. It's not going to help at that point. You have to give immunosuppressors. You have to give anticoagulants, immune modulators. And that's the whole point of this. That when you're
So after, this is very interesting. So after the second week or so, you're
That's
not
right.
as virulent.
And most people, 80% of the people, it's over in 2 weeks, and then that's it. But then there's 20% go on and have serious lung disease and other organ diseases. And those you have to treat differently. You don't give them antivirals. But Daniel Griffin was saying we're spending millions of dollars testing antivirals in these patients on the hopes they might work, but they don't, and we need to stop that.
Interesting. What are these blue, green, and red dotted line circles or arches?
Well, the green
you have
is
it in front of you?
Yeah, I do have it in front of me. So, the blue is a period when you might give immune modulators. The green is what he calls the ambulatory period, where you can move around, and then the red is the period when you should give anticoagulants, kind of late in the disease.
Wow. Okay. So I like this because this says that we have a pretty good, at least the best handle we've had on it so far. No.
Yeah, I think that's why fewer people are dying, even though we have many, many thousands of infections, far fewer dying than before because we've got information like this. We have sort of a better sense of how to treat people when in the infection.
Yeah, that's very good. That's encouraging. All right, Professor, we got to run. I hear we got to go hop in your Cadillac, hop in your Mini Cooper. I have a Honda Odyssey. Get in your van, your vehicle of choice, go to the polls and vote, right?
All right. Good luck.
With your mask. Thanks, Professor. Microbe.tv, and you can listen to the Professor's podcast. All right, hopefully we'll talk next week, Professor. Appreciate you. True story. Mike Slater. Big day tomorrow, and our coverage starts at 6 o'clock Eastern. 6 o'clock tomorrow Eastern right here on The First. Spread the word.